Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the journey of the tiny but the mighty Pluto through the sign of Aquarius, which begins on its birthday, the 21st of January 2024, and goes on initially through to the 2nd of September 2024. It's going to re-enter Aquarius on the 19th of November, where it will be through to 2044. I'm going to share with you what I see as the themes that Pluto is involved with, but also what we can expect through its journey through the sign of Aquarius. I'm also going to take you back to the time that it last made its way through the sign of Aquarius, which really correlated with some huge events from a historical and industrial context. I'm going to share with you also which zodiac signs broadly will benefit from this change and which may find it a little bit more challenging. That's going to be something that obviously is going to be of interest to you all, but I will be sharing in detail from Aries through to Pisces a taste of what you can expect from the perspective of your sun or ascendant or both throughout Pluto's journey. I'm also going to share with you Pluto's glyphs, the history behind that, who discovered it, how the story changed in terms of that discovery. Now, Pluto only gets to 2 degrees and 6 minutes in the sign of Aquarius, but in that first 2 degrees and 6 minutes, he is going to go alongside 4 fixed signs which have huge significance as well. Also, of course, Pluto will just nip into the first 10 degrees or the first decan of the sign of Aquarius. What's the story behind that? Also, the first 2.5 degrees of each sign is double ruled by that sign in a system called dwards. I'm going to explain that to you. It's called the 12th harmonic. It's a bit more of a Vedic approach, but it does provide a lot of illumination in terms of what we can expect. How long is the orbit of Pluto? Going to be sharing that with you. I'm then going to go on and share some celebrity birthdays with you. These may seem a little bit random. I'm particularly interested in music, so I've gone for Iggy Pop, Alison Krauss, Bill Wyman, previously of the Stones, but also Keithrichards. The reason I've chosen Keithrichards is because in his progress chart, it is going to be conjunct Pluto. What's the significance of that? The others, we're going to have a square to the sun in the case of Iggy and Bill, but an opposition with Alison. What's the significance of that? I'm also going to share with you the upcoming aspects that are going to be forged, with particular emphasis on the Sun and Mars. If you recall, when the eruption of violence occurred initially in Israel, it was when the position of Mars was in Libra, where it's in detriment, squaring with Pluto. So what happens when we have those harsh aspects with Mars and Pluto this coming year? I'll share the dates with you. But there's also a date that we all need to celebrate, because on June the 3rd, 2024, we are going to have one of the most important dates for humanity ever. Sounds like an exaggeration? Well, it's because Jupiter, the planet of growth, of faith, of optimism, international affairs, is in a trine with Pluto. So it's an air trine. This will never be repeated in our lifetimes, this particular event. That's how rare it is. So I'm going to share all those with you, then go on to share all those zodiac signs. But just before I do, I'm going to briefly dip into the natal horoscope of China. But I'm going to share with you not just their birth chart, but also their secondary progress chart, but also their solar arc or directions, and how they relate to the moving planets in the sky, but particularly the role of Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter, because I think this is going to be a truly momentous year for what China does or is doing. So much exciting stuff to share with you. If you are new to my channel, this is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please share them. I interact with each comment, but people also chat to each other too. And if you're a returning visitor, it's lovely to have your company once more. I truly appreciate all the comments, the likes, the shares, and obviously the subscriptions, because that helps to grow my channel. So if you've yet to subscribe, I'd be very grateful if you did now. Now, one of the most important things about Pluto's journey is understanding where it is in your natal chart, not just in terms of your sun sign. If you know your ascendant, you may know your natal chart, but if you're still sort of emerging and growing your knowledge of astrology, please take advantage of my special offer. You can get your 12-month personal transit forecast, plus also your character analysis, your life roadmap report. And the combination of those two documents, totally unique to you, will give you searing insights of what you can expect, not just this year, but future forwards in your life. But most of all, you'll be able to see exactly where Pluto is by house, or where Saturn is by house, and that will help you to get a much clearer understanding of how events are playing out in your personal situation. There's 30% off. Please see the link below. You'll also get your free Love, Zodiac, Chinese and Indian written 2024 booklets, absolutely free of charge. Now, please take advantage of my free download all about Pluto. You can click on the link beneath this video. It's a fascinating take that we've put together for you, totally free of charge, and please feel welcome to take advantage of this. So just to say that Pluto moves into Aquarius at 12:51 a.m. on the 21st of January, right through to the 2nd of September. But the retrograde begins on the 2nd of May, and that's at 2 degrees and 6 minutes. But that retrograde ends on the 12th of October. But Pluto's moving back into Capricorn on the 2nd of September, and then back into Aquarius on the 19th of November through to March the 8th, 2043. 19 long years. So Pluto moves into Aquarius on the 21st of January, but I just want to briefly dip into an event that occurs the day before, because on that day we have a cazimi, technically, when the Sun and Pluto are exactly aligned as we see it from planet Earth. And it's really symbolic because over the last 16 years, as Pluto has made its way through Capricorn, it's given us all an opportunity to appreciate the material world. Those people lucky enough to have gained more security in their life, perhaps done well financially, gone on some lovely foreign holidays, had a much better material lifestyle, then Pluto may have worked very well for you, because the sign of Capricorn is the sign of physical culmination. So it's very much to do with property, business. It can be to do with traditions, and in a very positive way, Capricorn can be very much to do with knowledge and wisdom. The ruler Saturn, slow moving, but it always is keeping us working at some part of our existence. So that's all very positive. The problem is the energies of Pluto. Well, let's just have a little think about these. So Pluto, of course, can be about destruction, but it also can be about reconstruction, so the phoenix. So anything to do with endings and beginnings are very much part of its influence. So the rebirth can be fantastic when it works well. So that creation energy, that creativity, very, very profound. But it can, especially in the sign of Capricorn, be very much to do with power and control and power struggles. So whether we're talking about UK or American politics, we've got a lot of that going on. We've obviously got a big struggle going on for territory in the Ukraine, territory in Israel too. And we've got China making bucolic statements about what they're going to do with Taiwan. So that Capricornian energy has a real upside in terms of stability, but it has a downside when big organizations or big corporations want to cling on to power and squeeze every pence of profit to suit the corporation rather than to suit the collective, which is what Aquarius is much more about. But there's no doubt about it, Pluto's influence, if you have experienced it, can be so profound. So sometimes Pluto will take things away from us that we're not ready to lose, which can be immensely painful. But also, it can give us the chance to go with the flow if we're really working at our inner world. And that can be a very intense process, but one that can be very meaningful. But also, there's no doubt about it that Pluto can be to do with sex, lust, desire, obsessiveness, all those kind of things as well. It's the higher octave modern ruler of the sign of Scorpio, which itself obviously is a very passionate sign. So who's broadly going to be influenced in a positive way by Pluto moving into Aquarius for these 2 degrees and 6 minutes initially this year? Well, I think it's going to be early born mutable, so that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces, or early born cardinal, so that would be early Aries, early Cancer, early Libra and early Capricorn. So they're going to benefit from this change. Who will find it broadly a little bit more challenging? Well, if you're a fixed sign, but particularly Taurus, Leo and Scorpio, but you have planets or personal planets along with the sun right at the start or the ascendant of those fixed signs, so up to about 2.5, 3, maybe 4 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, much more of a challenge. What about Aquarius? Well, my birthday is the 21st of January when Pluto moves into Aquarius. So Pluto's birthday is my birthday. And so for early born Aquarius people, whether it's the Sun, Ascendant, Moon, Venus and so on, the impact is really going to be decided on how you can work with the energy, how receptive you are to combining the energy of those personal planets with the intense power and desire for change that Pluto can bring. So it's really open to how we work with Pluto, how that will have an impact. Now I just want to share about Pluto's birthday because the astronomer Clive Tombaugh thought he'd discovered Pluto on the 18th of February. He was working out of the Lowell Observatory in America, but then they were checking some plates that they'd taken photographs of before and realised that Pluto was first spotted on the 21st of January. And the initial glyph of the sign of Pluto featured a monogram of Percival Lowell, PL. So he was the guy who set the observatory up, so sharing on the screen that initial glyph with you. Now the other glyph associated with Pluto features the circle, the crescent and the cross, and is known as the Biden symbol. So we have the trident with Neptune. The Biden is a prong, but just 2 prongs on it rather than the 3 that we have with Neptune. And that was the weapon associated with Hades in Greek mythology, the ruler of the underworld. Western tropical astrology is based more on a Roman mythology, hence Pluto. What Pluto gives us an opportunity to do is to dig deep, to delve, to really understand our super consciousness and help to rise above the more material desires we have. Its orbit is 248 years. The last time it was starting its journey in Aquarius was the 2nd of December 1778. The War of Independence was raging, had been for 3 years. On 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed and Britain granted sovereignty to the emerging America of that time. Britain and France were also at war because France took America's side, which wouldn't be a surprise being a republic. And Britain have continued and France have continued to have a little bit of a frosty relationship at time, whether it's to do with trade, culture, or wars. But that was a war at that time. And also in the 1780s, and this is really, really also truly symbolic, the Industrial Revolution began. Now, where I used to live, in the central part of Britain, is where it all began. You've probably heard of the Iron Bridge Gorge, the Iron Bridge itself, and all the potteries around Coalport, and a very intense area where all the manufacturing started to begin was really in the middle of the most beautiful countryside. And obviously that saw the outbreak, the widespread use of canals, and that then became railways and so forth and so on. So what can we expect from Pluto in Aquarius this time around? Well, first of all, let's have a think about Aquarius. It's an air sign, so it's communication, but it's also fixed. So a lot of the pop culture around Aquarius, I feel, is much more based on Uranus. But this is a sign of duality. Saturn is very much about the continuity that Aquarians like, the love of traditionality, and certainly the appreciation of friendships. I think a lot of Aquarius people share that, or the appreciation of individuality. And it's an interesting paradox, really, between the two areas. But that Saturnian energy is much more resistant to change. And of course, Uranus is really wanting to dart ahead and experiment, innovate. But also Uranus, in a more mythological sense, is the ruler of the sky. I would say it's the ruler of astrology. Not everybody would agree with that in astrology. Some people would say Mercury, for example. But certainly Uranus is about higher truths. And so the pop culture idea of Uranus being quirky and different and so forth could be true, but sometimes Aquarians like to actually go a little bit under the radar with that quirkiness. So it's not always manifested in quite the obvious way that people might think. The maximum that Pluto is going to get up to this year is 2 degrees and 6 minutes. And therefore, each zodiac sign can be divided into 12 sections known as towards, or the 12th harmonic. So that's 2.5 degrees. So it's only going to be in the first toward, and that's a double Aquarius influence. So I feel that we can see a lot of radical energy coming quite quickly. We saw it in those 11 weeks, artificial intelligence, those 11 weeks last year when Pluto was in Aquarius from the 27th of March to the 11th of June. And AI has been around for a long time, but suddenly was so much in the news, it was incredible. So, you know, that's something that's definitely going to be becoming more and more important in our lives. So I mentioned about the love of friendship, but also the more Uranian influence can be something that gives Aquarius people an understanding of trends, but particularly early born Aquarius people. But what about the first decan? Now, there is disagreement amongst the astrological community about this. Some astrologers will say it's Saturn, particularly if it's a traditional astrologer. Some people will say it is more to do with Saturn and Venus. Others will say it's totally Uranus. You will get a different view. My view is that the first 10 degrees, but certainly the first 2.5 degrees of Aquarius, are a lot to do with an appreciation of how things could be shaped for the collective good. So can be great humanitarians, but because of the detachment that Aquarius can have, because of the coolness of the air, that can seem a bit distant. That concern may not be shown in a very emotionally obvious way. But scientific knowledge and advancement definitely is going to be very important. And I feel that early born Aquarius people have got an interest in astrology very often, and can be very interested in those cultural trends, whether it is to do with music or fashion or science or things like metaphysics. Certainly there's an appetite for gaining knowledge for sure. But of course Uranus has a reputation of being quirky, unpredictable, changeable, needing space, needing to be up close, really that can definitely be true. And the fixed stars as a whole are very much to do with being very focused and, very consistent in the application of ideas. But I feel that in terms of Aquarius energy, can be quite bold, aspirational, and those metaphysics that definitely can be a theme, and therefore that feeds also into the more scientific realm. Anything to do with AI, robotics, science and machines, very much to do with this early blush of the sign of Aquarius. Now, I mentioned in my intro about the fixed stars. There's 4. The first, TAURUS, is exactly conjunct my sun, which is 30 minutes Aquarius. And strong imagination and passions, clairvoyance, fame, powerful mind, spoil and plunder. Well, I don't think that's true of me. But it can be very fortunate. A combination of Mars and Jupiter. At 1 degree and 4, we have Sham, which is combative, opinionated, danger of death in battle. Obviously, fixed stars, are something very historical. But then at 1:15, we have our Bererio, contemplative, cultured, artistic, congenial appearance and disposition. Very fortunate. A flavour of Venus and Mercury. I'll take that one. And then 1:47, we have Altar. Sudden but ephemeral fortune. Impulsiveness. Courage. Astrology. Writing. But it can be accidents. Yeah, I've had a few accidents, funnily enough. But that's neutral, Mars and Jupiter. So I just thought that would be a bit of fun to share those fixed stars. But you can see they're all quite edgy, which is quite interesting. Let's take a look at the event chart now, because if you watch my channel frequently, you'll know that I put a lot of worth on what the event chart tells us. So at the exact moment Pluto moves into Aquarius, the ascendant based on Greenwich and Placidus is 29 degrees in Libra. And that puts the Sun and Pluto together in the 3rd house. So I feel that there is going to be a revolution around how we communicate with one another. And, it's almost inevitable that devices will get implanted into people's bodies. I mean, obviously a lot of people have Fit watches and various other gizmos already, and things that measure sleep. And if I go for a walk at night and pick up my phone, hey, I've done 8,000 steps, I'm really chuffed. So that technology is quite entrenched in our lives already. The interesting thing in equal house is that the Sun and Pluto move into house 4, so that could change how we live, and it has been doing that in a way, hasn't it, with work from home. But I feel that Pluto and the Sun in the 3rd house is very much to do with ideas and our community, our connection with siblings, neighbours, our belief systems, really. And the combination of the two here, it's very intense, it's very dynamic. We have to use our expression of ideas with wisdom, really, because we have seen such a polarization going on in the way ideas are exchanged. It's not really very factual anymore for a lot of people. It's just all about trying to steer public opinion in a particular way by saying things that will be very popularist and will fire up certain sections of the community, but in a way which isn't very collaborative. So that's one of the things that Aquarius energy can be very good about. It can be to do with working in a more integrative way. So we find ways to network and cooperate and collaborate. But we need to use the authority that comes from the Sun conjoining with Pluto in the right kind of way. But we could see reforms, definitely in terms of local politics, I feel. People will want more say on things. For example, we've seen like a lot of things come in with that Capricorn energy, like Airbnb. Now, this isn't a personal view on the business behind Airbnb. The idea may be very clever, but is the way it's being applied in local communities having a very bad impact? And my argument would be there needs to be more licensing and understanding of the impact, particularly on people's ability to rent or buy houses at an affordable price. So those are the kind of topics that are going to become quite hot. We've also seen a lot of us become much more resentful about the power that some of the big media companies have over us. They've had all that information for years. I feel that they've been more powerful than governments. That's just my personal view. And we're going to see some of those media giants which have really prospered alter, change quite dynamically and dramatically, and some may actually completely lose flavour. Now we have had that over the time of the internet. I know that there have been winners and losers, but I feel that there's going to be a much greater public swell against the overuse of control of information. So that's what we're going to be pushing back on, people having too much information against us. Now within that event chart, Mercury is forging a fantastic link with Jupiter. That's great for trade, to be honest. But Venus, also about money, like Jupiter, is squaring up with Neptune. So we need to get our facts really straight. Otherwise we could get a little bit snared up. Now let's take a quick look at those celebrities. So first up, Keith Richards, my great hero. I think Keith himself has got a tremendous sense of fun and mischief and so quick-witted. Uranus conjunct Mars in his 7th house. He's quite combative, especially when he was younger. But when Keith was born, the midpoint between his sun and his moon was 1 degree in Scorpio. So although he's a Sagittarius and his sun is actually being squared by Neptune at the moment, which needs some care. But Keith's progressed ascendant is at 2 degrees and 24. So he's not going to be impacted quite as much as he could be this year by this event, but he will be impacted. So the first house is very much to do with our physicality, our body, the way we connect to people. And I feel that with Keith, the interesting thing is that the move in Pluto combines with that ascendant but squares up with his midpoint. He also has that move in Neptune squaring his sun, and the move in Saturn in the sky is going to go across his 4th house cusp pretty soon and going to conjunct his progressed sun in the 4th house. So very, very interesting. Something to do with dynamic change. And I think we've seen that with their new album, where I think Keith has been more at peace with the fact that Jagger wrote lots of the tunes. And he just seems to be in such a great place. But I feel that midpoint in Scorpio early on, and that square with his progressed ascendant, and the move in transiting Pluto, and Saturn on his progressed sun, and Neptune squaring his natal sun, means he does need to take a little bit of care. But really love sharing that with you. Next up is Iggy Pop. Now Iggy is going to be 77 on April the 21st. I've not done his wheel, but his sun is at 0 degrees and 43 minutes. Now the reason I've chosen this is because his sun will be squared by the move in Pluto. If we think of his chart in terms of the sun being the 1st house, just keeping it simple, that means that some kind of big transformation around his public profile is possible, but he does need to watch his health. Now, Alison Krauss had that wonderful collaboration with Robert Plant, but I think her best work has come with the Union Band. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. But Alison is 53 on July the 23rd. Now, I've chosen her because that's at 0 degrees and 29 minutes in Leo, so her sun is exactly opposite my sun, and therefore Pluto's going to be on her 7th house. So for Alison, something big around the relationship matter is going to emerge this year. Now Bill Wyman, I love the way Bill played the bass. I saw the Stones 4 times, and of course Bill decided to step back from the Stones, although he did take part somewhat on their latest album. And on October the 24th, Bill would be 88 years of age, and his sun is at 1 degree and 22 Scorpio. So, in fact, in a conjunction with Keith's midpoint. And could be why they sort of rubbed along. I know Keith Richards was obviously furious when Bill wanted to initially leave the Stones, but I feel for Bill, particular care, obviously because of his age, but it means Pluto's on his 4th house cusp, so he may be thinking a lot about where to live and how to live there. I know he's a great historian. I think he lives in Suffolk in a very old property. I think he has a great appreciation of heritage and stuff like this, but maybe he's going to be thinking in some ways of change in some part of his life, but again does need to be mindful of his health, because Sun square Pluto or Sun opposite Pluto particularly challenging. Now, I told you I wanted to share about China. Now, I have obviously done Chinese specials before, and I've had some stick for it. Sorry. I don't think it's necessarily good for any country to have too much power, whether it's in terms of international affairs, manufacturing. China's got a big debt problem, and they do make obviously a lot of the goods that we liked at a lower cost than perhaps we thought we used to be able to get them when they were made in the host country. And there's no doubt about it, the Chinese are absolutely fantastic at being very entrepreneurial. But if you see in their natal chart, they do have Pluto and Mars in that conjunction in the 7th house, which that's quite a warlike stance, because Mars in the 7th house does not lead to greatly comfortable and harmonious relationships, to be honest. It's very assertive. But they do have their moon, ironically, at 3 degrees in Aquarius, which I suppose is the fact that nominally, anyway, it's supposed to be a communist state. But you can see in their progress charts that Jupiter is at 2 degrees and 43 minutes. So on the face of it, having Jupiter conjunct the moon would be a very bountiful combination, particularly in the first house. The problem is, when we see Pluto move across their first house cusp, as it will do this year, that's then going to go conjunct Jupiter, and that could be quite a challenging influence along with the moon position, because the moon could be their desire for home security, and of course they have a great deal of focus on Taiwan. The problem with Jupiter can be very much to do with international affairs, borders, boundaries, but also dogmatism and overstating that assertiveness, and Pluto adds an extra drive and desire to dominate when it's in that combination with Jupiter if it's not used right. So I think that's a very worrying transition. So Pluto is right on their first house cusp. You can also see that Uranus at the moment is just in the 3rd house, but it will move across the 4th house cusp this year, and that could create some volatility. Now, they have got some issues with the property market in China and debt, and maybe doing something radical on the international stage is something they resist because of the knowledge of how it will affect their overall balance of trade and their growth. But I think it's quite concerning, to be honest, with the rhetoric that's been used more recently, the bucolic rhetoric that's come out. So one to watch, particularly I feel when Jupiter moves into the sign of Gemini, because it still will be in the 4th house initially on the 26th of May, and the 4th house is very much to do with home affairs. So Jupiter is the way the message can be delivered, you know, obviously in an exaggerated way through the rulership of Sagittarius, but also to do with the ideals in a way, much more to do with faith through the Pisces rulership of Jupiter. So I feel the Chinese situation with Pluto is not very encouraging, to be honest. I feel that looks a little bit worrying. So we've taken a brief look at the prospects for China for 2024. Also had a quick look at those rock and the country superstar in the case of Alison Krauss and what they may expect. But I want to look at somebody who's no longer with us, somebody of great notoriety, and their chart, and draw some parallels with Pluto. Pluto very much about karma. I think sometimes things do happen in life, and that saying's come up called instant karma. We saw someone being really rude to a young waiter in a restaurant and was really totally unnecessarily rude, and then turned around and was walking quickly and walked into a door. And even the people on her table laughed because it was instant karma for not being very kind to the young lad who dropped some food completely accidentally. But often in life we encounter people who don't behave very well and they seem to get away with it. But there's an incredible karmic energy around Jeffrey Epstein's chart and situation at the moment, because so much information is coming into the public eye, and Pluto does work in very secretive ways, but when the dam bursts, that's what can happen. So here's his chart. We don't know his time. On his birthday, the sun actually moved from Capricorn through to the sign of Aquarius. Now I feel he was a Capricorn, so I feel he was born very early in that day, but that means his sun was 29 degrees and 53 minutes, so straight up, so on the anaretic point. So that in a way gives it huge significance and power. So we have to think the sun at this time in the third house of communication. So this guy, whether we feel that what he did was very sinister and dark, which it was, he had a power to persuade people. Third house. Also had Mercury, the planet of commerce, in the sign of Capricorn in the third house. But this time also gives us an ascendant at 2 degrees and 53 minutes in Scorpio. Very passionate, but can be someone with a great preference for confidentiality. Saturn, the planet of business, exalted in Libra, but in the 12th house close to Neptune. That suggests someone who could be very crafty and cultivate through the Libran energy this apparent charm, but with more sinister motives. Also, Pluto goes right at the top of his chart in the 10th house. People with Pluto in the 10th house often end up very famous, but don't necessarily like the limelight. And that seems to be true of him too. Part of fortune, 10th house. No doubt about it, the guy seemed to make a lot of money. Jupiter in the 7th house at this time, this innate ability to cultivate all these influential people through sex, 2nd house Taurus, or money, 2nd house Taurus. Jupiter, obviously fortune. Then if we look at the positions of Mars and Venus in a conjunction, I've looked at all the players in the Epstein situation, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, they've all got Venus and Mars very close together. That doesn't mean to say that if you've got Venus and Mars close together, you're going to mirror their behaviour, but it does have a very passionate dimension. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's the way we use that energy. But in the 5th house, that's someone who really wants to enjoy life's pleasures. And again, with Pisces energy, can be a bit evasive, a bit escapist. So that just gives you a quick flavour of this guy's chart. But the fact is that Pluto aligns with his sun and the moving sun, so there's a solar return for him, as it prepares to leave the sign of Capricorn on the 21st of January. The sun moves on the 20th, so it's just preparing to move, and all this information's coming into the open. So all these public figures that were part of his secret dark web are really having the light shone on them in a very uncomfortable way. But there's more than this, I want to show you some more about his chart. So on the screen now, you can see a tri-wheel in the middle wheel, which you can see the arrows going to now. That's his natal chart. He also has his progress chart, and that is just stunning with this event. So in his progress chart, we've obviously assumed the moon position on the day he was born at 3 degrees in the sign of Aries. Now it could be a bit later in the day, but in terms of that time, it means the moon exactly on this day in his progress chart. So the moon moves about a degree every 4 weeks, and it keeps moving in the progression. And there you can see it also on the anaretic point in the sign of Libra, conjunct his natal Saturn, but squaring up with Pluto. How incredible is that? And if you look at his chart on the other side, just under the 7th house cusp, there is Venus. Progress Venus. This will be right. This won't be wrong. 29 degrees and 39. Venus is about desire, it's about money, self-worth, values. So it had been working through the sign of Aries for a long time, squaring up to Pluto. So we've got the T-square between the progressed moon, the progressed Venus, and his sun, but also the moving Pluto. That's karma for you. The moving Saturn in the sky is also in the 4th house. It's been in the 4th house for a while. You can see that his IC is at 9 degrees Aquarius. So now Jeffrey Epstein died on August the 10th, 2019. On that day, Saturn was in a retrograde in his 3rd house. So 3rd house is our ability to move around quickly, but opposite Uranus in his 9th house. So that was his appreciation of freedom, international travel. Not always obviously in a very positive way, but Saturn, the planet of restraint, opposite the planet of freedom on the day he died. And then Saturn moved across his 4th house. So again, very significant in terms of his death. So just to recap, we sometimes feel that people who perpetrate evil, such as Putin, get away with it time after time. In Epstein's case, not only did he, for whatever reasons, pursue this path, but also the influence that he had on all these other people led to him ending his life, so it's said, prematurely. But the circumstances around his case are all coming into the open in such a powerful way, whether it's Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and so forth, all these very, very influential people. And Pluto, just at the end of its journey through the sign of power, is bringing those revelations to the surface. And the way it all fits with his chart, the progressed Venus and moon, the moon we can't absolutely guarantee because his moon could have been later in that day. He could have been in Aquarius, because obviously he had an ability to cultivate friendships, which is an Aquarian trait. But I think Capricorn in the 3rd house, Scorpio ascendant, Saturn in the 12th, Venus, Mars in the 5th, Jupiter in the 7th, Pluto in the 10th, really fits for the sort of life that this guy had. That's not instant karma, but it is karma. Now, I think one of the things that we can all feel is that very powerful people can perpetrate these acts or have this influence over us and get away with it time after time. Well, in this case, karma and Pluto are speaking. Now, I'm just going to run through those aspects that I promised at the start of this video that are going to be particularly powerful this year. I've mentioned the 3rd of June with the once-in-a-lifetime Jupiter trine to Pluto. So I will revisit that. Then I'm going to give you a roundup of what I feel we've experienced with Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, and what we are likely to expect with Pluto in Aquarius, just to round off before I go through each of those 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces. And I should just say, after I've shared with you there the Jeffrey Epstein chart, that's how living astrology really works. It's extraordinary. If you want to speak to me for a one-to-one, please see my testimonials below. Or if you've yet to take that step from zodiac astrology into something more profound, take advantage of that special offer. They're great value and will give you so much insights to help guide your future. So on the 14th of February, Mars moves to join with Pluto in Aquarius. Now this is really going to be very powerful because we know that these two planets can be the cause of issues when they're in harsh aspects. The conjunction is really interesting. It's going to give a lot of propulsion to the newly arrived Pluto in Aquarius. So we're probably going to see something in terms of the news, the world order, where the desire for change is going to be pushed, all sorts of radical agendas, because early Aquarius can be very radical. But also we will obviously see some resistance, which will create the chaffing, because some people will still be hanging on to the old way through Pluto's long journey through Capricorn. So sparks can fly, but in our own situation, that can give us a tremendous amount of willpower. And again, it depends on what house it occurs on in your chart, as well as the overlay for your sun or your ascendant. But that desire, that passion, that determination, that willpower are definitely going to be very strong. Now on the 21st of April, which lines up with Iggy Pop's birthday, we have Sun square Pluto. Now this will have been happening twice a year for many years. And this is going to be the second time it's happened, because obviously it happened last year. So this is the Sun in Taurus squaring up with Pluto in Aquarius. And the key here is both fixed. So because Taurus can be very adhered to routines and can be a little bit stubborn and unyielding, what I thought is going to be happening here is that all the changes that are going on in the world, particularly in terms of employment and business, where we're being asked to really flex into all these new processes, approaches and technology, could feel pretty hard. And a lot of us could be feeling a little bit stressed out about the changes that we're having to bend into. The key with fixed energy is try not to be too rigid, because that can create more tension. We're not necessarily going to get it all on our terms, of course, because technology is really going to be so powerful future forwards. So us as tiny little individuals, all we can do in terms of the Aquarian energy is to forge tighter networks, bond together more in our communities, whether it is online, whether it is locally. But there can be some tension then for sure. The main thing is not to be too rigid. So June the 3rd, once more, that amazing link between Jupiter and Pluto, once in a lifetime, just so rare. None of us has ever experienced this before, and none of us ever will, not with this particular configuration. So Jupiter in Gemini is very much about those communications, but of course Jupiter in Gemini is in detriment. So one of the things we can have here is exaggeration. So we use quick pieces of information in order to shape people's perceptions. So someone or people who have been inclined to do that could get called out, because the Pluto in Aquarius energy is really pushing us all to have a higher purpose. Or it may be that we're going to see some new players come into the world of communication. If you go back all those years ago, who could have foreseen the way Facebook and YouTube have developed? Do you remember Friends Reunited? That was like the big thing. That just seems so many years ago. Do you remember the old dial-up where you used to hear the windsock? Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Okay, you don't. Sorry. But so things are very dynamic in the world of communications, and that's going to be one of the things that influence can shape. But if you are an early born air sign, that's a fantastic influence, absolutely for sure. And if you're an early born fire sign, it's not bad either too. So on June the 11th, we get the repetition of what happened in October with Mars square Pluto, but this time the flip. So Mars is in the sign of Taurus, so we get those issues again with perhaps being a bit willful and a bit stubborn. But we could see, I feel, some industrial disputes which have really broken out in a big way, certainly in the United Kingdom over recent years. Those could really be spiking up again, because people's desire to feel heard, acknowledged, appreciated, Aquarius, with the financial reality, because costs keep going up. Some employers are having to shed employees because the fixed wages they can't quite afford, or their fixed costs have gone up. So I think there's going to be a lot of tension around the financial sphere around June the 11th. July the 23rd sees the opposition between the Sun and Pluto, but this time we're talking about proud Leo. But this has been going on every single year over the last 16 years, but with Cancer. Now the great thing about the Sun being in Leo is it's domiciled. This is its favourite sign, so its glow, its magnificence is heightened. But I feel that if there are politics around any close relationships or any kind of partnership, and you are someone who's got early fixed energy in your chart, it's going to show itself quite powerfully at that time. You know what they say? Pride comes before a fall. It's important that we don't let pride and a desire to in some way have power over people get the better of us. July the 23rd. October the 22nd, well, we got the Sun squaring Pluto. So again, this has been going on every single year for many years, but this time the change is that the Sun is in Scorpio just, and Pluto just in Aquarius. So once more fixed. So you can see tremendous amount of fixed tension. Some possibilities with the air triplicity between the Sun and Jupiter, for sure, that's tremendous. And even possibilities between Mars and Pluto in a way in Aquarius on the 14th of February. But that square, the Sun in Scorpio, again, can be resistant to change or a bit secretive. There is a commonality because obviously Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio. But again, I think it could be around money. Money is going to be an issue vis-a-vis people's rights. And that's going to be one of the fascinating things of those two squares in Taurus and Scorpio this year, because Taurus is everyday money, Scorpio is longer term money. But also we know that Taurus and Scorpio can be about sex and intimacy. What's Pluto and Aquarius saying? Well, it could be that some people are going to want more freedom, more flexibility, more desire to do what they want as an individual. But group politics can definitely take quite a dark and intense turn at that time if there are people who, you know, tend to play games and manipulate and control in some kind of way. There could be some massive pushback collectively with that Pluto energy. So just to recap, what we've seen with Capricorn is a tremendous growth in the economic development, as some people would see it. But then we've, of course, had Brexit, then we've had COVID, then we've had the war in Ukraine, now the outbreak of violence in Israel. None of this stuff is great for world peace and stability. And the sign of Capricorn is terrific for upholding institutions that are noble, have wisdom, experience, and nous. And unfortunately, because the way the world is quickly changing, some of those old institutions, for example, I've mentioned this before, shopping centres, physical structures, are, if they haven't been integrated into the local environment, which has happened hugely in Britain, so we're getting shopping centres that are actually dying because of the way that things have been moved out of town, because of the cost of rentals, the cost of business rates, councils having to recoup some money they're not getting from central government in terms of parking fees. So it's choking off the life in those town centres. And that's the physical dying of something that has, you know, been fine and prospered for many, many years. So it's not necessarily a worldwide phenomenon, because I think some other countries have a much more balanced approach to the development of their urban areas. But certainly it's a massive problem in the UK. So that's a physical structure, Capricorn business, that is kind of dying. But of course we've got the new way of doing things, which is online. But it's not all good online. One of the most disappointing things that happened this year was that Amazon, who occasionally we buy things from because we are in a pretty remote part of Britain as it goes, I always used to buy things through Smile on Amazon, and a proportion of my sale would go to charities. They phased it out about a year ago. That's the excesses of capitalism, which is totally unacceptable. And then we've had obviously the energy crisis, but the profits that are being made are so excessively higher than they were before the energy crisis. It's obvious that they've raked in more profit on top of what they really needed to do. So again, that's excessive greed. And you know, we've had in Britain as well about when COVID broke out, there were contracts that seemed to be linked in a very crony way to various people who were connected to members of the government, and a lot of the kit that was purchased wasn't very good, wasn't fit for purpose, and billions of pounds of public money, 10th house Capricorn, very much to do with public money, really got lost. And corruption seems to be something that's rife all over the world. In a way, certainly in Britain, I'm not saying Britain was totally ever squeaky clean, but I think the integrity of people who are the leaders of this country has really wilted in recent years under the need for political expediency and power. So that is all the downside of Capricorn. But we are obviously going to need to flex and change, and we can still use the experience and knowledge and wisdom of Capricorn. Capricorn's very hard working, it's applied, it's systematic, it turns up. It doesn't necessarily want everything to make us an instant superstar, which is kind of some of the vibe that's out there these days. So the qualities of Saturn are still very, very important, the ruler of the sign of Capricorn. So what about Aquarius? I don't think it's going to be a panacea, to be honest. I do read some astrologers saying that a lot of the people like Jeffrey Epstein who have held power, Putin's another one, it's all going to make way. I really wish that was going to occur quite as we'd all like. And unfortunately, I feel the age of Aquarius, because of the coolness of the air sign, because of the Saturnian energy, the need to continue to have some kind of structures in place which are functioning in terms of public welfare, public health, those things are going to come much more into focus. And I feel that there is, within a very short period of time, as AI comes in, more people will have more spare time on their hands. And I think the way we live will become very, very different. But I think that is going to be quite challenging, because I think work is very good for us, but I've got a very Saturnian chart. So the Aquarius energy is very much about new techniques, new technologies, new health processes. But then if those new health processes see in some individuals extending their life hugely, who makes that decision? Who has that power? Some of this stuff is a bit dark and worrying as I see it. But we can use the friendship and fraternity, collaboration and cooperation of the sign of Aquarius to try to connect in different ways. But I feel that we all need to be much more conscious of the power that the technology companies have. You know, some people would say it's governments that have the power. I feel governments are struggling to keep up with the power of technology. But also, the sign of Aquarius is, in its very highest form, about the highest truth. Will, at the end of 2043, we be an improved society, much more evolved, much more conscious of our value to each other through the network, through how we can be mutually helpful, how we can celebrate the things we have in common. That's the lesson we're going to find out, because I feel it has been an extraordinarily cynical time where money and profit have become the primary motives above all else. And I think if anything can be pushed back, that is going to be the Aquarian energy. And I think even Uranus, the co-ruler of Aquarius in Taurus, has been showing that people will push back if they don't feel valued and don't feel heard. But this new reality that we're developing, I think, does need to make us much more conscious of the environment, of the welfare of animals, of the welfare of those people who always seem to be on the rough end of life's events, and whether we're going to see a massive shift to the political leadership in the wider world, I don't know, because to me it seems there isn't any compelling candidate in America set to come through. We've certainly got a political vacuum in Britain, but the thing we can say about Aquarius is it can be about hope. So through the seismic changes we're going through, we need to retain hope, and we need to understand the value of each other to one another, however we relate, even if it's a bit more detached and a bit quirky, which can be part of the Aquarian vibe. But we still need to embrace those positive Saturnian values, but get a better balance between the people dynamic and the physical business dynamic. But I'm now going to share with you each of the zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect for each of the zodiac signs. And I'm going to break it into 3 parts for each sign, whether you're born early, mid or late in your sign, or your ascendant is there. So you can get a flavour, so you can get 3 decans really of each of the Pluto transitions for each of those signs. Please stay with me for those, and thank you so much for being with me today. So Aries, if you're an early born Aries, I think it will be an exciting transition for you, because what's happened or will happen is that Pluto's moving or nibbling into the part of your situation to do with how you connect to others. I've said this a few times recently, so I do apologise if it does sound repetitive, but you can't underestimate Saturn or Neptune in an overall analysis of your situation, whatever is going on. So for you, I feel if you're early born, it's very encouraging, because some things may have withered away since March the 7th last year, or your connection to some people may have been more tenuous, or you may have felt in some way even betrayed, whichever part of Aries that you're born in. But if you're an early born Aries, this is going to fire you up to try to get that new start that Saturn and Neptune have been tailing down your old past, and along comes Pluto, ready to give you a lot of boldness and fresh energy. If you're born in the middle of Aries, I think that it does depend on where other planets are in your natal chart. And generally, I think you're going to pick up, in terms of whole sign astrology, the same flavour as those early born Aries. If you're later born in Aries and right towards the cusp of Taurus, this could still be a little bit of a challenging year. And the reason for you to understand this is because you're on a square. Now, obviously, if you were born in Taurus, the square would be exact if you were early born Taurus, like Iggy Pop. But because you're so late, it may still be that you're trying to work out exactly how you're going to apply your skills and talents in the big wide world in a way that makes you feel validated, appreciated, saluted, and that you can gain some personal satisfaction and standing from, where your goals and ambitions can still be met. So you may have to still work at it for the next year, but you're going to find in 2025 and 26 that things really come back towards you, particularly when Neptune initially comes into your sign, but of course Saturn comes into your sign, and we're going to have Uranus enter into Gemini. But whatever part of Aries you are, that 3rd of June trine between Jupiter and the position of Pluto is absolutely fantastic. You need to be networking with the people who are really good for you, Aries. That's the truth. And it may be that you need to be more phlegmatic and more accepting that some people and some parts of your existence from the past are done. And it is embracing that bright new future, even if it means adapting and changing, which could be uncomfortable. So Taurus, if you're born early in your sign, you do need to understand that there could be some big shifts in terms of your work. Now, it could be something that you're going to choose. For example, if you're exiting the work market because of retirement, or you're deciding to adapt your life in some way, you may feel that you're guiding the process. And that's the best way with Pluto, is to anticipate the changes we need to make. But if you're not, and it feels that where you work or who you work for is in a state of flux, making ever more demands on you, which are really not very comfortable to deal with, what Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house are asking you to do is to think very much about your longer term future. So whatever the immediate need to earn money is, it needs to feel right in terms of your connections to others. Now, if you're born in the middle or towards the end of the sign of Taurus, I feel that you're actually still going to gain from Pluto pushing you to learn new skills, new ideas, travel as much as possible, and embrace an exciting approach to your situation. But somehow or another, the world of work, I feel it's going to be a commonality for all Tauran people. There is going to be some big shifts there. We all know it. We all know this AI revolution's coming. But for you, it may be particularly uncomfortable. And it's also important that if you are feeling overburdened with work, that you understand the impact that that's having on your welfare. Now, it's not always easy to work less if we need the money to survive, but some kind of big shift could be in the works. And the best way to grapple with it for you, I feel, is to learn new skills. So be open to a fresh appraisal of your situation. How can you adapt the knowledge and experience you have so far that can be applied in a new way? That could be life enhancing and so exciting for you if you seize the opportunity. So Gemini, for you, if you're an early born Gemini, this is so exciting, particularly when Jupiter joins you on the 26th of May, and we have that exact trine on the 3rd of June. You're going to reach a lot of people this year if you are an early born Gemini, but you could do a lot of travel as well. You're going to be expanding your world in all sorts of ways. If you have got circumstances in your life due to health or work demands, or just your general environment is not as enabling as you would like, maybe it seems a little bit harder to see how Pluto will work into your situation. But basically the 9th house is the sector of higher truths, and Pluto can be about deep revelations. Your philosophies could change hugely between now and 2044, to be honest. And whatever your situation is now, knowledge is going to be part of the journey. You're a master at quick exchanges and being very funny and amusing and very knowledgeable, and can give short bites in that very fast, inimitable way. But I feel that whether it's sharing knowledge that you've got, or many people say that we've got a book inside of us, but we don't actually ever start typing it. That could be something that appeals to you. If you've always thought that you wanted to go somewhere completely off the beaten trail, you could head off this year for sure, whichever part of Gemini you are. But if you are born later in Gemini, I think there is still a little bit of an issue to do with a transformation that's going on in your life, and it could be how you earn money. It could also be about how you can be close to people and be invested in people. Because you can be so quick-witted and come up with those retorts very fast, in some ways that can be a mask, even for yourself, because being an air sign, you can kind of kid yourself, but that's the reality. But if you are feeling a little bit distant or isolated from someone, who you find it more difficult to get up close and personal, Pluto's asking you to keep working at that. And perhaps the best way to do it, whichever part of Gemini that you're in, is through knowledge. And I think you have an insatiable ability to absorb snippets. And, if you're someone who's more academic, knowledge may come very, very easily to you if you're very well read. But there's an opportunity for the collective, that is Gemini, to expand your horizons. And that may mean breaking out from any self-limiting thinking, philosophies, belief systems, all which can be ruled by Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter arrives in your sign, 26th of May. But Pluto being in your 9th house is... the 9th house is very redolent of the energy of the rulership of Sagittarius, Jupiter coming into your sign. So the 9th house is coming through Pluto. So you could really go through quite a massive change over the next few years. Could be really exciting, but there may be some financial anxieties if you're born more towards the back end of Gemini, or maybe it's more to do, putting it bluntly, with sex and how intimate you feel you can be with people or not. So Cancer, for you, the last 16 years has been a massive time for relationships. You may have met the love of your life. You may have had really important and significant relationships end or break down, separation from people that used to be important in your life, because you become much more conscious of the whole concept of power in terms of your personal autonomy, or as they say these days, agency. And the seventh house, although it is characterized as being very much to do with harmony, really it's a combative position, because it's where we're setting our minimum expectation of what we're going to get from others. And Pluto is very uncompromising. So the chances are that there has been some big stuff that's gone on. The next stage of your epic journey with Pluto is the 8th house. So as much as there can be the relating going on, it's now about how deep and fulfilling it feels. So for example, if you're not in a relationship because you've set your stall in such a way that people will not enter your world unless that they're really worthy of you, which is brilliant, but that could be leaving you feeling a bit isolated, a bit undernourished when it comes to your connections to others. And remember, connections don't have to be purely sexual or intimate. So what the 8th house is about is very scorpionic, very plutonic. It's very, very deep. And it can be to do with how you earn money. It can be to do with possibly your reproductive system, if you do want to bring a child into the world. But it also can be a desire to have some kind of very meaningful bond. But equally, if you're in a relationship still and it just isn't working very well, then the 8th house could be the destruction of that relationship, to be honest, and the replacement of it with either your freedom or something else different and better. So that's really what's going on for all Cancerians. But I would say that if you're an early born Cancer, what this event means is that Pluto is in a quincunx with your Sun. Don't underestimate your sex appeal. That's what I would say with that particular aspect. You could be absolutely emanating a huge charisma. Also true if you're right at the end of Cancer too, but this time it can be a little bit more confrontational. So if you are born later in Cancer and you're finding a relationship situation difficult at the moment, learning more about power or the sharing of power or how power is exchanged between you and the other person is a big part of what this particular phase is going to represent for you. Now, Leo, over the last 16 years, as I've been saying to you for some while, you've made so many sacrifices. And for a sign that really does love to be adored at the very least, certainly admired at the minimum, Pluto moving into your 7th house is changing the focus a lot. Perhaps you have, dedicated yourself to a job, dedicated yourself to be of service to others. Perhaps you've been playing a support role within your family. Perhaps you've been a domestic dynamo. Perhaps you've done really, really well with your work by concentrating on the small details. And that's been something that you've done exceptionally well with. But has it been crushing your passion in some way, going through all those intricate processes so efficiently? But of course, the 7th house in traditional astrology is open enemies. If you're born right at the start of Leo and you've got some relationship issues going on at the moment, they're going to intensify over this year. Sorry, but they will. But equally, if you're single, somebody could come into your world who is massively impactful and really could stir your senses in an incredible way. If you're born more towards the end of Pluto, I would say that this initially could be a bit more benign. It is going to be a quincunx. Your sex appeal can still be boosted hugely by that. But I feel if you're early born Leo, that's where the challenge, if you're in the first 2 or 3, 4 days of Leo, this year is really asking you to think very carefully about how you interact with others. So Virgo, there's a little bit of an irony, to be honest, because Pluto moving into your 6th solar house is very much in keeping with the energies of your sign, which is purity, organisation, systematic care with things, being meticulous, making sure anything to do with food and diet is working well, and physical health. If there are any kind of weaknesses around those areas, Pluto is going to reveal them over the next few years. So, if you have got a particular penchant for a calorific goodie or whatever, then that will be what Pluto will be wanting you to reform. But in an interesting way, if you are born right at the start of Virgo, that means Pluto's in a quincunx, and your sex appeal is going to be very, very high. And of course, you have Saturn and Neptune in your sectors of relating, and Saturn could be sort of begging you the question, how much do you want a really serious relationship, or how much do you want a relationship that's not working for you to make way? One of the things with the sixth house is it is about being of service, which you usually have a great appreciation for. As I always say, not being servile, but perhaps if your work hasn't been very satisfying for you, that's the area that you may seek some kind of big change, especially with Jupiter moving into your sector of career on the 26th of May later this year. So Libra. So here we are. You've been waiting for this day for a very long time. But of course, you know that Pluto is going to go into the retrograde from the 2nd of May 2024 through to the 12th of October. And it will go back into Capricorn on the 2nd of September through to the 19th of November. So it's not quite the last of seeing Pluto in your 4th house. But you certainly got 38 weeks of this year, if you're an early born Libra, to really feel much more liberated. You've still got Saturn and Neptune in your 6th house of work, responsibilities and obligations. Not going to be a stroll in the park. There is some stunning stuff coming later this year, particularly that 3rd of June trine between Jupiter and Pluto. That's awesome for all Libran people. If you are born more towards the back of Libra, so you're on the cusp of Scorpio, you may continue to feel some tension, just being really honest, over the next couple of years. But when Pluto moves deeper into Aquarius, that will be very liberating for you. But of course, that's just based on the exact point of your ascendant or the exact point of your sun. You have lots of other players influencing your situation. And if you want me to look at it, I can obviously work with you on that in a one-to-one. But in general, what you're being asked to really do now is worry much less about the basis of your life, whether it's the physical basis or the emotional basis, and be much more in touch with the playfulness and self-expressive side of your life. So there's lots of good things to come, even if you are later born in Libra, but particularly if you've learnt the lessons that Pluto in Capricorn has been asking us, with my Libran ascendant, to learn, which is having firmer boundaries around people who are good for us emotionally or not. And the area that may have come under massive pressure may have been the family. That may have been the trickiest part of your existence of all. Now, Scorpio, for you, if you're born right at the start of Scorpio, then Pluto, your modern ruler, is definitely impacting you in terms of home and emotion. And because Uranus is still in your 7th house, is there a correlation between the two? Saturn in the 5th, if a romance isn't feeling so good at the moment, you're going to have to work at it. And that working is perhaps being more open to conversation about feelings, particularly if you are a more private type of Scorpio. If you're later born in Scorpio, more towards Sagittarius on the cusp, you're going to love this. You're going to find that you can find your voice even more. There's a lot that's happening at the start of 2024 that is going to give you a lot of power in terms of your personal expression. But if you're someone who's interested in renovation, Pluto being in that early part of Aquarius could see you buy a rundown property and really, or rent one and really make it into something really lovely, because that Phoenix-like energy of Pluto can work very much to your advantage. So Sagittarius, for you, the last 16 years has been a fantastically about how you earn a living and the basic foundation of your world, your sense of self-worth and your values. Pluto moving into the third house means that your voice is going to be heard a lot more, whether it's with people immediately around you in your community, whether it's your ideas you often have brilliant ideas. They're really going to be set on fire. Your passion is going to be something to really be admired. Now, if you are born more towards the end of your sign, don't worry, because there you're getting a semi-sextile with Pluto, so that's not bad at all, very encouraging. But for Sagittarians in general, because you've got Saturn and Neptune still in the fourth house, care still needed around the emotional sphere of your situation. And there could be a link. Maybe you're going to spend more time with siblings or more time with people in your community that you have a rapport with, and that in turn feeds your sense of security. Those are really interesting themes for you, and it's really going to be when Jupiter moves into your opposite sign on the 26th of May that your year's really ignited. So there's lots to look forward to this year, but that preoccupation with just trying to get some kind of stability in your world, that makes way more for the realm of ideas. Really, really lovely. So Capricorn, Pluto moving through your sign, particularly if you've got more than just the sun in Capricorn, probably hasn't been easy at times, because the first house, whether it's our sun or it's our ascendant, is very much to do with our physicality. If there have been times when, you felt overwhelmed by the demands of life, it would hardly be a surprise. But Pluto moving into your second house can now help you to see that the ideas and individuality that Pluto's been asking you to develop can shape up into something that's more manifest, it's more tangible. So you're really going to be interested in what you eat and what you drink, and anything to do with stability. All very Capricornian themes, really. But whether it's growing your own food, making your own wine, doing more home cooking, being a bit thriftier, trying to get the balance of ins and outs around your finances a bit sharper. Pluto can help you in that regard as well. But you could see some of your core values alter quite radically between now and 2043. Aquarius, if you're born early in Aquarius like I am, or you have the ascendant or the moon, Venus, Mars, right at the start of Aquarius, you have to sort of take them one at a time, really. If you've got a lot, then that's a little different. If you've got a stellium right at the start of Aquarius, but certainly the sun, the combination of the Pluto can give great power. That power's got to be used wisely. Also, it can lead to people overworking. It depends what house it's in for you. For me, it's actually in my natal chart in the third house. So I'm obviously hoping that my approach to astrology will reach more people, because that's been my life's work ever since I started this 29 and a half Saturn return years ago. So, and it has been, it's been a hard graft. It hasn't been a walk in the park. I've really had to dig in. So what I want to do is to communicate more effectively and in a way that's more beneficial for the people I reach, but also for myself in a more efficient way. But it just depends what you've got and how it plays out and what house. But certainly a lot of intensity. If it's the moon, it could be how you live. It could be to do with moving home, renovation. If it's Venus, it can be to do with relationship. If it's Mars, it can definitely be to do with lust. It just depends what it is that Pluto's going to connect for you. But for general purposes, I feel that Pluto moving into Aquarius for all Aquarians is a good news story, because if you're born later into Aquarius, near to Pisces, you've got the semi-sextile, which is very, very helpful. But essentially, this is the time when we may think afresh about how we engage with technology. If you're a born-again Luddite, and some Aquarians can be like that, it's absolutely the case. You may be pushed to learn new skills around technology and devices that at first you could be quite resistant to, but could be very liberating. Or maybe your job's going to be adapted in some way and you've got to go with the flow, which won't be easy, but with Jupiter coming into your 5th house, so many opportunities, particularly that June the 3rd trine, stunning in lots of different ways, whether it's to do with your social life, your love life, children, really stunning opportunity. So Pisces, Pluto moving into the sign of Aquarius is your 12th house, having Saturn in your own sign, along with Neptune. They're not necessarily easy. Pluto in the 12th house can be, to be honest, about hidden enemies in traditional astrology. And it can also be about the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at, the parts that we shield ourselves from. We kid ourselves that reality isn't out there. So you could find yourself becoming much more enmeshed and immersed in psychology, counselling, personal development, all this deep, deep stuff. But if there are parts of your group or people around you that you can't absolutely rely upon, wherever you're born in Pisces, between now and 2043, there is going to be a lot of radical changes, I feel. But if you can dive in and embrace it and welcome it, then this can be very exciting. So if you're someone who's very much into spirituality and healing and of evolving, then this is going to be food and water to you, and you can gain hugely from it.